In the glittering sapphire palace of Bucharest, where legends whisper of a cursed gem bringing doom to the greedy, Hercule Poirot arrives for a lavish wedding, only to unravel a deadly poison plot. When industrialist Victor Stănescu collapses in the library, cyanide-laced brandy in hand, suspicion falls on a cast of suspects: his heartbroken fiancée Irina, jealous ex-lover Lucien the artist, ruthless rival Harold Baxter, secretive psychiatrist Dr. Nadia Voss, loyal valet Ion, and more. As alibis crack, hidden letters reveal affairs and betrayals, a midnight shooting silences a witness, and a storm traps them all. Poirot's little gray cells expose a vengeful killer driven by buried family secrets and a stolen sapphire heirloom. Justice prevails in this twisting tale of motive, misdirection, and murder. Chapter 1. The Arrival in Bucharest. The Orient Express glided to a halt at Bucharest's Gara de Nord with the precision of a well-oiled machine, its whistle piercing the crisp autumn air like a distant lament. Hercule Poirot, the renowned Belgian detective, descended the steps with his customary elegance, his small egg-shaped head held high, and his magnificent mustaches curled to perfection, defying the unruly gusts that tugged at his overcoat. He adjusted his Homburg hat and surveyed the bustling platform with a critical eye. The chaotic swirl of porters, vendors hawking roasted chestnuts, and passengers bundled against the November chill did not impress him. "Ah, Bucharest," he murmured to himself in his precise French accent. "The so-called Paris of the East. But where is the order, the symmetry? It lacks the refinement of the true City of Light." A liveried chauffeur awaited him, holding a discreet sign bearing his name. Poirot nodded approvingly at the man's impeccable uniform and followed him to a gleaming black limousine idling curbside. The drive through the city's broad boulevards, lined with ornate Belle Époque buildings and the occasional horse-drawn cart, took them southward toward the Dâmbovița River. There, rising like a jewel from the urban tapestry, stood the Sapphire Palace, a grand hotel of white marble facades, arched windows, and towering spires that caught the fading afternoon light. Legends whispered of its namesake, a fabled sapphire gem once housed within its walls, said to bestow fortune on the pure of heart, but calamity on the avaricious. Poirot dismissed such superstitions. He dealt in facts, not folklore. In the opulent foyer, with its polished floors reflecting the glow of crystal chandeliers and the faint scent of lilies perfuming the air, the Countess Elena Dragomir awaited him. She was a woman of striking poise, her silver-streaked hair swept into an elegant chignon, her emerald silk gown whispering as she hurried forward. Age had etched fine lines around her dark eyes, but they burned with the intensity of old nobility. "Monsieur Poirot," she exclaimed, extending a gloved hand, "how gracious of you to come on such short notice. Your reputation precedes you. I recall your triumph in the affair of the blue train. You are our only hope." Poirot bowed low, kissing her hand with continental flair. "Madame la Comtesse, it is Hercule Poirot who is honored. Your telegram spoke of urgency, of shadows over a joyous event. Pray, enlighten me as we proceed." They crossed the foyer, where bellhops in brass-buttoned jackets darted about, and entered the gilded cage of the elevator. As it ascended smoothly to the upper floors, Elena leaned closer, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "My niece, Irina, is to be wed tomorrow to Victor Stănescu, a man of considerable means from the industrial sector. The ceremony is set here in the palace's grand chapel, followed by a reception in the ballroom. But I fear complications, whispers of enmity, old grudges resurfacing. Victor has rivals, and Irina's past admirers have not all faded gracefully into memory. Poirot's green eyes gleamed with interest. Complications, madame? Of what nature? Poirot does not deal in vapors. Specifics, if you please. Elena sighed, her fingers twisting a pearl necklace. Among the guests are Harold Baxter, an American tycoon whose business dealings with Victor soured into bitter rivalry. Something about steel contracts and underhanded bids. Then there is Lucian Popescu, a talented but tempestuous artist who once courted Irina with fervent passion. She chose Victor's stability over his bohemian dreams. My distant cousin, Dr. Nadia Voss, a psychiatrist from Vienna, is here as well. Brilliant, but with a manner that unnerves, always probing the psyche. The hotel manager, Monsieur Henri Duval, oversees all with his French efficiency, though I sense he harbors secrets of his own. Baxter brings his secretary, Miss Clara Thorne, a sharp-eyed Englishwoman who misses nothing, and Victor's valet, Ion Grigor, a Romanian of unwavering devotion, yet with eyes that dart like a hunted fox. The elevator doors parted onto a corridor carpeted in deep crimson, leading to Poirot's suite. It was a haven of luxury, velvet drapes framing views of the river and snow-dusted gardens below. A four-poster bed piled with plump pillows, and a writing desk stocked with fine stationery. Poirot unpacked methodically, aligning his silver-backed brushes and cologne bottles with geometric precision. The little gray cells, they begin to stir, he reflected, gazing out at the twilight settling over the city. A wedding, a palace of splendor, yet beneath lurks the potential for discord. Poirot shall observe, and all shall be revealed. That evening, the pre-wedding dinner unfolded in the Sapphire ballroom, a vast chamber adorned with frescoes of mythical scenes and tables set with silver cutlery that gleamed under the chandeliers. The air hummed with the clink of glasses and the strains of a string quartet playing Strauss waltzes. Poirot, seated at the head table beside the Countess, surveyed the assembly with his keen gaze. Victor Stănescu, the groom-to-be, was a robust man in his 40s, with a square jaw and a booming laugh that masked a shrewd intensity. He raised a toast to Irina, his fiancée, a vision of youthful beauty, with raven hair cascading in waves and a sapphire brooch, the family heirloom, pinned to her ivory gown. "To tomorrow," he declared, "when we forge our future amid the glories of this palace." Harold Baxter, broad-shouldered and clad in a tuxedo that strained at the seams, responded with a sardonic grin, his American accent cutting through the murmurs. "Hear, hear, Stănescu, just remember, fortunes can turn quicker than a roulette wheel." His eyes flicked to Victor with thinly veiled contempt. Lucian Popescu lingered at the periphery, his lean frame hunched over a sketchpad, charcoal flying as he captured Irina's profile. His dark curls fell untidily, and his gaze held a melancholy fire whenever it met hers. Dr. Nadia Voss, in a severe black dress that accentuated her angular features, engaged Miss Clara Thorne in conversation. "Freud teaches us that dreams reveal the subconscious," Voss intoned, her Viennese accent clipped. Clara, prim in spectacles and a high-collared blouse, nodded politely but fidgeted with her napkin, her cheeks flushing at the intensity. Ion Grigor moved silently among the tables, refilling wine glasses with the deference of long service, his expression inscrutable. Monsieur Duval, The manager hovered like a vigilant host, ensuring every detail, from the placement of orchids to the temperature of the soup, met perfection. As the courses progressed from caviar to roasted pheasant, Poirot noted the undercurrents. A heated whisper between Victor and Baxter, Lucien's lingering stare, Irina's forced smile when Victor's hand clasped hers too tightly. The Countess caught his eye, her own filled with unspoken plea. At last, as the clock chimed midnight and the guests began to disperse, Poirot rose, bidding good night with a courteous bow. Retiring to his suite, he loosened his tie and pondered the evening's mosaic. A tableau of motives, perhaps, he mused, but the picture is incomplete. Tomorrow, the drama unfolds. Outside, the wind whispered through the gardens, carrying the faint promise of snow, while the Sapphire Palace slumbered under the stars. Chapter 2. The Body in the Library. The first pale fingers of dawn had scarcely begun to filter through the heavy velvet curtains of the Sapphire Palace, when a piercing scream shattered the stillness, reverberating through the corridors like the cry of a wounded animal. Hercule Poirot, who had risen early as was his habit, was in the midst of his meticulous morning ablutions, applying a touch of pomade to his mustaches, when the sound reached him. He paused, his hand steady despite the jolt, and tilted his head, listening. "Mon Dieu," he murmured. "That is no ordinary alarm. It is the voice of terror." Without haste, but with purposeful stride, he donned his dressing gown over his pajamas, slipped his feet into soft leather slippers, and ventured into the hallway. The palace, so resplendent by night, now seemed a labyrinth of shadows, the gas lamps along the walls flickering dimly as if reluctant to illuminate what lay ahead. Other doors creaked open, sleepy guests emerged in various states of disarray. The Countess Elena, her hair unbound and face ashen. Irina, wrapped in a silk robe, her eyes wide with fright. Lucien Popescu, disheveled and clutching a sketchbook as if it were a talisman. They converged toward the source of the disturbance, the grand library on the ground floor, a room of towering oak shelves lined with ancient volumes, leather armchairs arranged around a massive fireplace, and a vast Persian rug that covered the parquet floor like a tapestry of intricate knots. Poirot arrived first, pushing open the heavy double doors with a firm hand. The scene before him was one of frozen horror. In the center of the rug, illuminated by the weak morning light slanting through the tall windows, lay Victor Stănescu. His body was sprawled awkwardly, one arm flung out as if in supplication, his face twisted into a grimace of excruciating pain, the eyes bulging and lips drawn back in a rictus. Beside him, fragments of a crystal tumbler glittered on the floor, the remnants of a dark liquid staining the carpet. A faint, bitter odor hung in the air, reminiscent of crushed almonds. Poirot's nostrils flared in recognition. Cyanide. Unmistakable. The scream had come from a chambermaid, a young girl now huddled in the corner, her apron twisted in her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. "I came to light the fire, sir," she stammered as Poirot approached, and there he was, cold as stone. Poirot knelt briefly beside the body, careful not to disturb the scene, his keen eyes noting the details. Victor's fingers clenched into fists, the nails digging into the palms, a slight froth at the corners of the mouth, the absence of any visible wound. "Death came swiftly," he observed aloud, "but not without suffering. The convulsions, they are characteristic." By now the others had gathered, a tableau of shock and suspicion. Irina let out a strangled cry and would have rushed forward had the Countess not restrained her. "Victor, oh God, no!" she wailed, burying her face in her aunt's shoulder. Lucien hovered at the threshold, his face pale beneath the stubble, murmuring something incoherent. Harold Baxter pushed through, his pajamas rumpled, a cigar already clenched between his teeth, though unlit. "What the devil?" he barked, his American bravado masking a flicker of unease. Dr. Nadia Voss, composed even in her night attire, stepped forward with professional detachment. "Allow me," she said, her voice steady as she knelt to check for a pulse, though it was plainly futile. Monsieur Henri Duval, the hotel manager, arrived moments later, breathless from his haste, his usually impeccable attire hastily assembled. "This is catastrophe," he exclaimed, wringing his hands. "I have summoned the authorities. The police will be here imminently." Indeed, within minutes, the sound of footsteps echoed from the foyer, and Inspector Alexandru Petrescu burst in, a burly figure with a walrus mustache and a uniform that strained at the buttons. 2 constables flanked him, one carrying a camera on a tripod. "Stand back, all of you," Petrescu ordered gruffly, his Romanian accent thick. "No one touches anything. This room is now under my jurisdiction." Poirot rose gracefully, introducing himself with a slight bow. "Inspector, I am Hercule Poirot, detective extraordinaire. I offer my assistance in this matter. Observe, if you will, the victim ingested poison, likely cyanide, from that glass. The scent confirms it. Note the fingers, clenched in spasm, a hallmark of such a toxin. And the tumbler, wiped clean, perhaps? No fingerprints visible, except one suspects, the deceased's own." Petrescu eyed him suspiciously, but nodded, gesturing for his men to begin photographing the scene. Flashbulbs popped, casting eerie shadows across the bookshelves. "Poison, eh? Deliberate or accident?" he muttered, scribbling in a notebook. "We'll see. Names, all of you. Alibis from last night." The group shifted uneasily as questions began. Irina, supported by her aunt, spoke first, her voice trembling. We argued last evening after dinner. Victor accused me of still harboring feelings for Lucien. It was nothing, a lover's quarrel. I retired to my room alone around 1 o'clock. Tears streamed down her cheeks, smudging the remnants of her makeup. Lucien Popescu stepped forward, his hands raised in protest. "I had nothing to do with this. Yes, I loved Irina once, perhaps still, but murder? Absurd. I spent the night in my studio suite, sketching by lamplight until dawn. The muse does not sleep." His eyes darted to Irina, a mix of longing and defiance. Harold Baxter snorted, crossing his arms. "Stănescu and I had our differences. Business gone sour. He owed me a fortune from a botched deal, but I'd sooner sue the bastard than poison him. I was in the billiard room till late, playing a few frames with Duval here." He jerked a thumb at the manager, who nodded vigorously. Dr. Voss, having completed her cursory examination, stood and brushed off her knees. Classic symptoms of cyanide poisoning: rapid onset, asphyxiation at the cellular level. Death would have occurred within minutes of ingestion. I saw nothing amiss last night. I retired early to read. Her tone was clinical, almost detached, as if discussing a case study rather than a man she knew. Miss Clara Thorne, Baxter's secretary, hovered at the edge of the group, her spectacles perched on her nose, a notebook clutched to her chest. "I glimpsed Mr. Stănescu entering the library alone after dinner," she said primly, her English accent crisp. He seemed agitated, pouring himself a nightcap from the decanter there. She pointed to a side table where a crystal decanter sat, half full of amber liquid. Ion Grigor, Victor's valet, appeared last, his face a mask of stoic grief. He bowed low before the inspector. I prepared the master's usual brandy in his suite, as always, but he dismissed me early, said he wished to be alone. I heard nothing unusual from my quarters adjoining his. His voice cracked slightly, betraying the depth of his loyalty. Duval, mopping his brow with a handkerchief, assured the room of the staff's integrity. The Sapphire Palace employs only the most trustworthy. No one would dare such an act under my watch. Yet his eyes flicked nervously to the windows, as if expecting phantoms. Poirot, who had been circling the room like a cat on the prowl, paused to listen to each statement, his head cocked, committing every nuance to memory. "Indeed," he interjected softly, "everyone possesses a motive, a secret perhaps, the rival in business, the jilted lover, the betrayed fiancé, the knowledgeable doctor, the observant secretary, the devoted servant, the vigilant manager. And yet, the method, it is precise, intimate. Poison requires opportunity and cunning." As the constables dusted for prints and sketched the body's position, Poirot's sharp gaze alighted on Victor's clenched fist. Gently, with a handkerchief to avoid contamination, he pried open the fingers, revealing a crumpled scrap of paper. Unfolding it carefully, he read aloud, "Beware the Sapphire's curse." The words were scrawled in bold ink, anonymous and ominous. A murmur rippled through the assembly. The Countess gasped, "The legend, the gem that dooms the greedy." But Victor, he laughed at such tales. Inspector Petrescu snatched the note, bagging it as evidence. "A warning, or a threat fulfilled. We'll analyze the handwriting." He turned to the group. "No one leaves the palace until cleared. Rooms will be searched." Poirot stroked his mustache thoughtfully, his mind a whirlwind of deductions. The curse, a convenient superstition, or a clever ruse to mask human malice. The glass, the brandy, the solitary nightcap, threads in a tapestry of deceit. As the body was covered with a sheet and preparations made for the coroner, the detective felt the familiar thrill of the chase. "The little gray cells, they awaken fully now," he whispered to himself. Outside, the snow began to fall in earnest, blanketing Bucharest in white as if to shroud the palace's dark secret. The day had dawned on murder, and Hercule Poirot was determined to bring light to the shadows. Chapter 3. Interrogations and Alibis. The morning sun, pale and wintry, streamed through the glass panes of the Sapphire Palace's conservatory, casting elongated shadows across the exotic ferns and potted palms that lined the wicker furniture. Hercule Poirot had chosen this verdant retreat for his initial interrogations, preferring its relative seclusion to the oppressive atmosphere of the library, now cordoned off by Inspector Petrescu's men. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and blooming orchids, a stark contrast to the chill of death that lingered in the palace's corridors. Poirot seated himself in a high-backed chair, his notebook open on his lap, a silver pencil poised in his manicured fingers. "Order and method," he reminded himself softly. "We shall peel away the layers, one by one, until the truth emerges like a pearl from its shell." He began with Irina Stănescu, the bereaved fiancée, who entered the conservatory hesitantly, her ivory morning dress accentuating the pallor of her skin. She sank into the chair opposite him, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief. Monsieur Poirot, she whispered, her voice fragile as porcelain. This is a nightmare. Victor, gone. Who could have done such a thing? Poirot leaned forward, his green eyes sympathetic yet probing. Mademoiselle, my condolences are profound, but to uncover the perpetrator we must speak frankly. Tell me of your relationship with the deceased. Was all harmonious in this impending union? Irina hesitated, her gaze dropping to her lap, where her fingers twisted the sapphire brooch pinned to her bodice, a radiant gem that caught the sunlight and fractured it into blue sparks. We met 2 years ago at a gala in Paris. Victor was charming, ambitious. My family? We have noble blood, but little fortune remains after the wars. His wealth offered stability, a future. But yes, there were tensions. Last night, after the dinner, we quarreled in the hallway. He accused me of lingering affections for Lucien Popescu, my former suitor. It was untrue, or at least the flame had long since dimmed. Lucien and I shared a brief romance in my youth, filled with poetry and passion, but it ended when reality intruded. I chose Victor because I believed in our life together. I loved him, Monsieur Poirot, despite his flaws. Poirot noted the tremor in her voice, the way her eyes avoided his. And your alibi for the hours after midnight? The poison acted swiftly, but opportunity must be established. I returned to my suite alone, she replied, exhausted from the evening strain. I read a novel until sleep came, perhaps around 2 o'clock. Aunt Elena can confirm I did not stir. With that, she rose, her composure cracking as fresh tears welled, and departed, leaving behind the faint aroma of her jasmine perfume. Next, Poirot summoned Lucien Popescu to the adjoining garden, where the artist paced amid the frost-kissed rose bushes, a cigarette dangling from his lips, its smoke curling lazily into the crisp air. His attire was rumpled, his dark eyes shadowed by sleeplessness. "This is madness," he declared as he sat on a stone bench, crushing the cigarette under his heel and immediately lighting another. "Victor dead, and eyes turned to me because of old loves? I am an artist, not an assassin." Poirot regarded him steadily. "Monsieur Popescu, jealousy is a potent motive. Speak of your history with Mademoiselle Irina." Lucien's features softened momentarily. "We were young, idealistic. I painted her in the studios of Montparnasse, her laughter, her fire. But she craved security, and I could offer only canvases and dreams. When she chose Stănescu, it wounded me deeply. Last month, I created a portrait as a wedding gift, pouring my soul into it. Victor saw it, accused me of mockery, and in a fit of rage, he slashed it to ribbons. Yes, I resented him, but murder? No. My hands create, they do not destroy." "And your whereabouts last night?" Poirot pressed. "Alone in my room, sketching feverishly. The muse visited amid the turmoil. I worked until the first light. No witnesses, alas. Art is a solitary pursuit." He exhaled a plume of smoke, his gaze defiant yet haunted. As Lucien departed, Harold Baxter lumbered into the lounge adjacent to the conservatory, a Havana cigar already clamped between his teeth, its tip glowing as he puffed vigorously. The American tycoon sprawled in an armchair, his bulk straining the cushions, exuding the confidence of a man accustomed to boardrooms and battles. "Ask away, detective," he boomed. "I've nothing to hide, except maybe a few trade secrets." Poirot smiled faintly. "Monsieur Baxter, your rivalry with the victim is well known. Elaborate, if you please." Baxter chuckled, a rumble like distant thunder. "Stănescu and I partnered on a steel venture, factories across the Balkans. But he embezzled funds, siphoned them into his pockets while our deals crumbled. The fool was teetering on bankruptcy. I confronted him yesterday afternoon in the foyer, demanded repayment. He blustered, promised settlements after the wedding. Ha! Now I'll chase his estate through the courts. Your alibi? Poirot inquired. In the billiard room with Duval until midnight, sinking balls and sipping scotch. Then to bed. Alone, mind you. My secretary can vouch for my snores echoing down the hall. He grinned, but his eyes held a calculating glint. Dr. Nadia Voss followed, gliding into the conservatory with the poise of a panther, her black wool dress severe against the greenery. She seated herself gracefully, her angular face impassive, hands folded in her lap. Monsieur Poirot, I am at your disposal. Psychology is my domain. Perhaps I can assist in profiling the killer. Commendable, madame, Poirot replied. But first, your connection to Monsieur Stănescu. I treated him for insomnia in Vienna last year, she explained, her Viennese accent precise. He suffered nightmares of financial ruin, subconscious manifestations of guilt, no doubt. I prescribed mild sedatives, nothing more potent. Cyanide? Beyond my purview. I deal in mines, not poisons. And last night? I retired early to my chamber, immersed in Jung's archetypes until sleep claimed me around 11, solitary as always. Her gaze was steady, unflinching. Miss Clara Thorne appeared next, perched on the edge of a chair in the secretary's alcove off the lounge, her typewriter silent for once, her spectacles reflecting the light. She fidgeted with a pencil, her prim demeanor slightly unraveled. Dreadful business, she said in her crisp British tones. Mr. Stănescu, such a vital man gone. Poirot nodded encouragingly. Mademoiselle Thorne, what did you observe? I overheard him threatening Mr. Baxter during dinner, something about ruining you if you press further. Tense, it was. As for me, I spent the night organizing correspondence in my room, retiring at 12:30. No disturbances. Ion Grigor, the valet, was interviewed in the pantry amid the gleam of silverware he polished with mechanical fervor. His uniform was spotless, his posture rigid. Master Victor was good to me, he intoned, his voice low and accented. Enemies circled him like wolves, but I saw none tamper with his brandy. I fetched ice from the kitchen at his request, left it in his suite, then withdrew to my quarters. Finally, Monsieur Duval in his cluttered office, surrounded by ledgers and keys. A missing key to the poison cabinet in the kitchen, he admitted reluctantly. For vermin control, cyanide pellets, only staff access it, but it vanished yesterday. Sabotage, perhaps? Poirot paced the conservatory alone afterward, fragments coalescing in his mind. The sapphire brooch's gleam on Irina's dress replayed in his thoughts. A heirloom tied to the curse? Or misdirection? That afternoon, a police search unearthed a vial of cyanide amid Lucien's pigments. For etching metal plates, the artist protested as suspicion mounted. The web of alibis, motives, and secrets tightened, each thread pulling Poirot deeper into the enigma. As the sun dipped lower, casting golden hues over the gardens, he murmured, "The puzzle takes shape, but the center remains obscured." Chapter 4. The Hidden Letters. The afternoon light filtered through the tall windows of the Sapphire Palace, casting a pallid glow over the corridors that now seemed more like echoing tombs than passages of grandeur. While Inspector Petrescu and his constables methodically grilled the hotel staff in the servants' quarters, extracting reluctant admissions about petty grievances and overheard whispers. Hercule Poirot took a different path. He preferred the subtle art of exploration, the quiet revelation of clues hidden in plain sight. With the Countess Elena's permission, he obtained a master key from Duval and began his perusal of the victim's suite, a lavish set of rooms on the third floor overlooking the river, where Victor Stănescu had spent his final hours. The suite was a study in opulence, heavy brocade curtains framing the view, a mahogany desk cluttered with business papers, and a four-poster bed still rumpled from the night before. Poirot moved with the precision of a surgeon, his gloved hands opening drawers and cabinets without disturbing their contents unduly. In the bedside table, he found nothing of note. A half-empty bottle of cologne, a gold pocket watch stopped at precisely 12:47, perhaps the time of death. But in the writing desk, a locked drawer caught his attention. The lock was sturdy, but Poirot, ever prepared, produced a small set of picks from his waistcoat pocket. With a few deft twists, it yielded. Inside lay a bundle of letters, tied with a faded ribbon, their envelopes addressed in a feminine hand. Poirot untied them carefully, scanning the contents. The first began, "My dearest Victor, the stolen moments in Vienna last spring haunt my dreams. Your promises whisper of a future unbound by convention." The signature, Clara, Miss Clara Thorne, Baxter's prim secretary. Passionate missives detailing clandestine meetings in shadowed cafes and hotel rooms, pledges of eternal devotion interspersed with pleas for commitment. Poirot's mustache twitched. "Ah, the eternal triangle," he murmured, but with edges sharper than expected. He pocketed the letters and descended to the lounge, where Clara Thorne sat alone, her typewriter idle, staring vacantly at a cup of cold tea. Poirot approached softly, placing the bundle before her. "Mademoiselle, a word in private, if you please. They are yours, non?" Clara's face drained of color, her hands trembling as she recognized the handwriting. "How? Where did you find them?" She glanced around, ensuring no eavesdroppers, then slumped in her chair, the facade of efficiency crumbling. "It was a fling, nothing more, a momentary madness during our travels. Victor charmed me with his intensity, promised to divorce any prior entanglements and marry me instead. But he lied, strung me along while courting Irina. I ended it weeks ago in a fury, burned his replies. I thought it over. Tears welled, but she dashed them away. Do you think I poisoned him? Out of spite? I was hurt, yes, but not homicidal." Poirot nodded sympathetically. "The heart? It can drive one to extremes, mademoiselle. But Poirot seeks truth, not judgment. You mentioned overhearing threats. Did Victor speak of enemies?" "Only vaguely," she replied, composing herself. "Business woes, mostly. He feared ruin." As Clara departed, Harold Baxter entered the lounge, summoned by Poirot's discreet note. The American tycoon chuckled heartily upon hearing of the affair. "That cad, seducing my own secretary under my nose? No wonder she glared daggers at him during dinner. Serves him right, the double dealer. But if you're implying I knew and acted, nonsense. I'd have fired her and sued him, not resorted to poison." Dr. Nadia Voss, passing by the doorway, paused at the threshold, her sharp ears catching the exchange. She raised a sculpted eyebrow, her expression one of clinical interest. "Repressed emotions, Monsieur Poirot. They can fester like untreated wounds, leading to outbursts of violence. Freud would have much to say on the matter." Poirot inclined his head. Indeed, madam, the psyche is a labyrinth. But come, join us briefly. He steered the conversation deftly, probing Voss's own consultations with Victor. Returning to the library, now unsealed but guarded by a constable, Poirot conducted a more thorough search. The wastebasket beside the desk yielded a treasure, a torn page from what appeared to be Victor's diary, crumpled and discarded. Piecing it together, Poirot read the scrawled entry. Nadia knows my secret, the embezzlement, the forged ledgers. She probes too deeply in her sessions. Must silence her before she exposes all. Nadia Voss? The doctor's name leaped from the page like an accusation. Confronting Voss in her suite later that afternoon, Poirot presented the fragment. She examined it calmly, her face betraying no alarm. Victor consulted me about blackmail. Yes, she admitted, seating herself by the window where the snowflakes danced outside. He claimed an anonymous tormentor threatened to reveal his financial frauds, debts piled high, investors deceived. In our therapy, he unburdened himself. I advised confession, to Irina at least, as a path to mental peace. But silence me? He never voiced such threats directly. Perhaps paranoia gripped him. As Voss spoke, a commotion arose downstairs. Irina, informed of the affair by a whispered rumor from Clara herself, perhaps in a moment of catharsis, fainted in the foyer. Lucian Popescu rushed to her side, catching her in his arms, murmuring comforts as the Countess fanned her with a napkin. The scene drew glares from Baxter and Duval, who muttered about impropriety. Poirot observed from the balcony above, noting the artist's tender concern, the flicker of opportunity in his eyes. That evening, as the palace dimmed under early twilight, another shock rippled through the guests. Ion Grigor, the valet, had vanished. His quarters were empty, a single note left on the pillow. I cannot stay. Forgive me. Inspector Petrescu ordered a search of the grounds, but Poirot suspected more. Flight from guilt or elimination as a witness. Descending to the basement amid the hum of boilers and the scent of coal dust, Poirot discovered a concealed door behind a stack of crates. It led to a narrow passage, damp and cobwebbed, emerging in the gardens near the riverbank. Fresh footprints marred the mud, men's boots, size 10 perhaps, heading toward the water. An escape route, Poirot noted aloud to the accompanying constable, or an entry for an intruder unseen. The plot thickens. Over a subdued dinner in the dining room, the ballroom deemed too festive for mourning, the Countess Elena drew Poirot aside to a quiet alcove. Her face, lined with worry, bore the weight of unspoken burdens. Monsieur Poirot, I must confess my own shadow. Victor swindled me, you see. Invested my remaining estate in his schemes, only to lose it all in speculations. I faced ruin, begged him for restitution, but he delayed. Yet I summoned you not for vengeance, but to prevent tragedy. I sensed the gathering storm. Poirot patted her hand reassuringly. Madame, motives abound like stars in the night sky. But the guilty one shines brightest to the trained eye. As the evening wore on, alibis began to crack like thin ice underfoot. Baxter admitted a brief absence from the billiard room. Irina recalled a late-night wander in the halls. Lucian's sketches showed timestamps that could be forged. The hidden letters had unlocked doors, but the full chamber of secrets remained veiled. Poirot retired to his suite, the wind howling outside, his mind a vortex of connections. The web tightens, he whispered, and the spider reveals itself soon. Chapter 5. The Midnight Revelation. As the first flakes of a gathering snowstorm swirled outside the Sapphire Palace's windows, blanketing Bucharest in a hush of white, Hercule Poirot orchestrated a gathering in the grand ballroom. The chandeliers, dimmed to a soft glow, cast flickering shadows across the polished parquet floor, where tables had been cleared away to form an open space reminiscent of a stage. The guests assembled reluctantly, their faces etched with fatigue and weariness after a day of relentless scrutiny. Inspector Petrescu stood by the doors, arms crossed, his mustache bristling like a hedgehog's spines, while two constables flanked him, notebooks at the ready. Poirot, impeccable in his evening suit, positioned himself at the center, a small table before him bearing the fateful brandy decanter, a replica glass, and assorted props from the crime scene. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice resonant yet measured. We reconvene not for merriment, but for reconstruction. The poison that felled Monsieur Victor Stănescu was administered in his brandy, a nightcap he poured himself in the library. But how did the cyanide enter the bottle? Who had the means, the moment? We shall reenact the evening's movements, and the truth, it will emerge from the shadows. The group shifted uneasily. Irina, her eyes red-rimmed, clutched the Countess Elena's arm. Lucian Popescu lit a cigarette with trembling fingers, the flame dancing erratically. Harold Baxter puffed on his cigar, exhaling clouds that mingled with the room's tension. Dr. Nadia Voss sat composed, her hands steepled as if in analysis. Miss Clara Thorne adjusted her spectacles nervously, while Monsieur Henri Duval fidgeted with his cufflinks. Ion Grigor, apprehended earlier that day by police at the train station, claiming he fled in panic over false accusations, stood rigidly, his loyalty now laced with resentment. Poirot directed them like actors in a play. We commence with the dinner's end. Mademoiselle Thorne, you poured the after-dinner liqueurs. Demonstrate. Clara rose, mimicking her actions at a sideboard laden with bottles. Her hand shook slightly as she decanted amber liquid into glasses. I served the table, she said, but Victor declined, saying he'd take his in the library later. Next, Ion Grigor reenacted carrying the tray. I brought the brandy to the master's suite earlier, he intoned, as per routine. Untouched, I swear. Poirot nodded, then turned to Duval. Monsieur, you uncorked the reserve bottles in the pantry. Show us. Duval complied, his movements precise, but his face flushed. As the simulation progressed, a subtle clue surfaced. The replica glass, when held to the light, revealed a faint smudge near the rim, a trace of red, like lipstick. Poirot held it aloft. Observe, this mark on the original glass, analyzed by the inspector's laboratory, matches the shade worn by Mademoiselle Irina. Did you touch the glass, mademoiselle? Irina paled, her hand flying to her mouth. No, perhaps during the argument. Victor offered me a sip to calm my nerves, but I refused. My lips barely brushed it. Whispers erupted. Lucian shot her a protective glance. Poirot then produced one of Lucian's sketches, handed over earlier. Monsieur Popescu, this drawing depicts Victor alone in the library, but regard the shadow at the door, a figure lurking. Whom did you capture? Lucian squinted at his own work. A mere impression. The light played tricks. I sketched from memory after glancing through the keyhole on my way to bed. It could be anyone. Baxter interrupted with a grunt. Enough theatrics. I admit, I visited Stănescu briefly in the library around midnight, demanded my money one last time. He laughed, poured his drink, and I left in disgust. No poison from me." Dr. Voss leaned forward. Intriguing. Victor mentioned in therapy his familiarity with cyanide from his factory's pest control. But as a psychiatrist, I must note, such knowledge could tempt the desperate. I prescribed nothing lethal, yet I have handled it in medical contexts long ago. The revelation hung heavy. Poirot pressed Ion. "And you, monsieur? Your disappearance, fear or guilt?" Ion bowed his head. "Fear, sir. Master struck me once, accusing theft of a trinket. But suicide? He was not the type. Vibrant, scheming. No, this was murder." Poirot examined the crumpled note anew. "Beware the Sapphire's curse," he announced. The ink, fresh, not from Victor's pen. A forgery planted to evoke the legend and mislead. Who benefits from superstition? A search of Duval's office, conducted earlier with Petrescu, had yielded a forged will, naming the manager as a beneficiary, claiming distant kinship to Victor. "Preposterous!" Duval cried, leaping to his feet. "I am no forger. Someone frames me. The passage in the basement, perhaps used to plant it." The Countess confessed quietly. "I pawned the sapphire brooch to Victor months ago to settle debts. He refused to return it, planning to sell for profit. But I would not kill for a gem." As midnight approached, the storm intensified, winds rattling the panes like impatient specters. The lights flickered, plunging the ballroom into momentary darkness. Gasps echoed, a scuffle ensued. When illumination returned, all were accounted for, except a sense of encroaching peril. In the ensuing hush, a figure crept toward Poirot's suite later that night. He had anticipated intrusion, leaving his door ajar, feigning sleep. It was Clara Thorne. Her face ghostly in the candlelight, she carried a letter clutched in her hand. "Monsieur Poirot," she whispered urgently, slipping inside. "I must speak. I saw the killer last night, lurking near the pantry. It was—" Before she could utter the name, a shot cracked through the air, the bullet shattering the window and grazing Clara's arm. She slumped, blood staining her sleeve, alive but dazed. Poirot sprang up, shouting for aid. Inspector Petrescu burst in, revolver drawn, as the palace awoke to chaos. The shooter had vanished into the storm, but Poirot noted the trajectory from the corridor opposite. A quick search revealed no weapon, but the acrid scent of gunpowder lingered. Clara, bandaged by Dr. Voss in the infirmary, murmured through pain. I glimpsed a silhouette. Familiar. Poirot paced his room afterward, the events crystallizing. The midnight revelation had provoked the culprit, desperate to silence witnesses. The net draws close, he mused, staring at the swirling snow. But the final threads elude. Chapter 6. The Gathering Storm. The Sapphire Palace awoke to a world transformed by the night's blizzard, the gardens buried under a pristine shroud of snow that muffled all sound, as if nature itself conspired to entomb the secrets within. Clara Thorne, her arm bandaged and slung across her chest, rested under guard in the palace infirmary, a converted sitting room stocked with medical supplies and overseen by a stern nurse dispatched by Inspector Petrescu. The wound was superficial, a graze that burned like fire but spared vital arteries. Yet the attack had shattered the fragile veneer of civility among the guests. An attempt to silence, Poirot declared to the inspector as they examined the shattered window in his suite, shards of glass crunching underfoot like brittle ice. The culprit grows desperate, revealing their hand. Petrescu grunted, his breath fogging the chill air. The bullet lodged in the wall, caliber matches a revolver reported missing from the palace armory. But traces lead to Monsieur Popescu's room, fibers from his carpet on the casing. Lucien, summoned and protesting vehemently, claimed theft. My door was unlocked. I sketched late into the night. Anyone could have slipped in while I paced the gardens for inspiration. His alibi for the shooting hour was vague. A solitary walk amid the flurries, footprints now obliterated by the storm. Poirot intensified his probe, beginning with Irina in the sun parlor, where weak daylight filtered through frost-etched panes. She sat wrapped in a shawl, the sapphire brooch absent from her attire, as if its weight had become unbearable. The argument with Victor, she confessed under Poirot's gentle urging. It was over more than affections. He insisted on selling the brooch, my family's last treasure, to cover his debts. I pleaded, but he grew furious, claiming it his by right of the pawn. In the heat, I may have wished him ill, but poison? Never. Her eyes, rimmed with shadows of exhaustion, met Poirot's with a plea for belief. Baxter's turn came in the billiard room, the green baize table, scarred from idle cues. The American tycoon leaned on his stick, his cigar ash scattering like gray confetti. My alibi? Duval left early, yes, claimed a headache. I lingered, practicing shots till 1. But if you're sniffing for motive, Stănescu's ruin was my victory. Alive, he squirmed under my thumb. Yet a flicker of unease crossed his features when Poirot mentioned the forged will, perhaps a planted distraction, but one that hinted at deeper financial entanglements. Dr. Voss, interviewed in her chamber amid stacks of psychological tomes, presented her notes with clinical detachment. Victor's entries suggest paranoia, bordering on the suicidal, visions of downfall, self-inflicted ends. But observe the handwriting. Steady, not the scrawl of despair. Poirot dismissed the notion outright. Non, madame, this is murder most calculated, a web spun with precision. Suicide lacks the drama of the curse note, the tampered bottle. Ion's loyalty, once unyielding, began to fracture under repeated questioning in the servants' hall. Master beat me once, he admitted reluctantly, his eyes downcast on the flagstone floor. Over a misplaced cufflink he deemed theft, but I bore it for the wages, the roof. Flight? Panic at the accusations? I feared the noose for a crime not mine. Petrescu pressed him on the hidden passage, discovered leading to the river bank where a small boat bobbed, half buried in snow. An escape planned? The inspector barked. Ion shook his head. Not mine, perhaps the master's, for clandestine meetings. Poirot, pondering this, theorized aloud to the assembled group in the drawing room that afternoon. Consider, mes amis, the cyanide. Intended for another? A mix-up in glasses, a bottle switched in haste? Murmurs rippled, eyes darted suspiciously. Clara wheeled in on a chair for the gathering, her face, pale but resolute, revealed her midnight vision. I saw Dr. Voss in the library with Victor, voices raised in argument. She left abruptly. He poured his drink alone. Voss paled, her composure cracking like fine china. An accusation? Preposterous. Yes, we spoke. He accused me of blackmail, of using our sessions to extort, but I treated his mistress anonymously, a woman from his past seeking solace. The room tensed, whispers grew. The mistress? Poirot echoed, his voice a velvet probe. Voss hesitated, then confessed. Not Clara, as you might think. It was the Countess Elena herself in her youth, a fleeting liaison with Victor decades ago before his rise. Scandalous, if exposed. It could ruin her niece's prospects. Elena, present and aghast, rose with dignity. Ancient history, buried long ago. Victor resurfaced it in therapy, mocking my vulnerability, but I harbored no lethal grudge. Accusations flew like arrows in the charged air. Baxter pointed at Voss. You had access to poisons, knowledge from your Vienna clinic. Lucien defended Irina. Leave her be, she's suffered enough. Duval muttered about staff sabotage, while Ion glared silently. The storm outside mirrored the tumult, winds howling as thunder rumbled distant warnings. Poirot retreated to the conservatory amid the chaos, the glass enclosure a bubble against the gale. He paced among the wilting palms, piecing the mosaic, the lipstick smudge, the shadow in the sketch, the missing key, the forged documents. Footprints in the snow, preserved near the passage exit, matched the tread of Voss's boots, small, distinctive heels. She ventured out, he murmured, perhaps to dispose of evidence. Confronting Voss privately in the library that evening, as firelight danced on the shelves, Poirot laid his cards bare. Madame, the passage, your prints lead to the river. What did you discard? Voss's eyes narrowed, but she maintained poise. A walk to clear my mind, nothing more. The argument? He threatened to expose my own indiscretion, a past error in prescribing, long forgiven. But murder? You overestimate my venom. As night deepened, the palace creaked under the storm's assault, lights flickering as power lines strained. Poirot gathered stray threads. Clara's interrupted revelation pointed to a familiar silhouette, tall, perhaps masculine, yet Voss's frame was slender. Ion's boat knowledge hinted at complicity. Irina's missing brooch, stolen or hidden? In his suite, Poirot pored over notes by candlelight, the wind a symphony of unrest. The gathering storm breaks soon, he whispered, his little gray cells whirring like a machine. Clues aligned, motives crystallized, but the final revelation awaited the calm after the tempest. Outside, the snow piled high, isolating the palace like a fortress under siege, while within, the killer's mask slipped further. Chapter 7. The Unveiling. Under the crystalline glow of the Sapphire ballroom's chandeliers, now fully illuminated against the lingering twilight of the storm's aftermath, Hercule Poirot assembled the weary suspects for the final act. The snow outside had ceased its fury, leaving Bucharest in a crystalline hush, the palace gardens sparkling like a field of diamonds under the emerging moon. Inside, the air was thick with anticipation, the guests seated in a semicircle of gilded chairs arranged at Poirot's direction. Inspector Petrescu paced at the periphery, his uniform crisp, a pair of handcuffs glinting at his belt. The Countess Elena sat rigidly beside Irina, whose hands trembled despite the warmth of a cashmere shawl. Lucien Popescu sketched idly on a napkin, his charcoal capturing the tension in furtive lines. Harold Baxter lounged with feigned nonchalance, a fresh cigar unlit between his fingers. Dr. Nadia Voss maintained her Viennese poise, though her eyes betrayed a flicker of wariness. Miss Clara Thorne, her arm still bandaged, clutched a handkerchief, while Monsieur Henri Duval mopped his brow incessantly. Ion Grigor stood at attention, his valet's demeanor unbroken. Poirot positioned himself at the center, a diminutive figure of unassailable authority, his mustaches waxed to perfection, his patent leather shoes reflecting the light. He cleared his throat, the sound echoing like a gavel. Mes amis, the hour of revelation has arrived. For days, we have navigated a labyrinth of deceit, motives woven like the threads of an intricate tapestry. Victor Stănescu met his end not by accident or curse, but by the hand of a murderer most cunning. Poison in the brandy, cyanide, swift and merciless. But why? And by whom? The little gray cells of Hercule Poirot have assembled the puzzle piece by piece, and now the picture is complete. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Irina leaned forward, her voice a whisper. "Please, Monsieur Poirot, end this torment. Who killed my Victor?" Poirot raised a hand for silence. "We begin with the motives, for they are legion. Monsieur Baxter, your rivalry, debts unpaid, businesses sabotaged. You confronted him, yes, but your bluster is that of the lion who roars but does not strike fatally. Mademoiselle Irina, the quarrel over affections and the sapphire brooch, your family's heirloom, pawned and withheld. Jealousy, perhaps, but your grief rings true, unfeigned. Monsieur Popescu, the jilted artist, your passion for Irina undimmed, the destroyed portrait a symbol of rage. Yet your hands create beauty, not death. Mademoiselle Thorne, the scorned lover, letters burning with betrayal. Hurt, oui, but not to the point of venom. Monsieur Grigor, the loyal valet, abused yet devoted. Your flight a panic, not guilt. Monsieur Duval, the manager with the forged will and missing key, greed whispers, but cowardice restrains. Madame la Comtesse, swindled estates and ancient liaisons exposed. Desperation, but not destruction. He paused, letting the words settle like dust after a gale. Dr. Voss shifted slightly, her fingers tightening on her lap. Poirot's green eyes fixed upon her. And then, there is you, Dr. Nadia Voss, the psychiatrist from Vienna, probing minds like a surgeon dissects flesh. You, madame, are the architect of this crime. Voss scoffed, her laugh brittle as cracking ice. Absurd, Monsieur Poirot. What motive could I possibly have? I treated Victor, eased his torments. Blackmail. He accused falsely. Our sessions were confidential. Poirot smiled faintly, a predator's gleam. Ah, but the motive runs deeper than mere extortion, madame. Let us unravel it step by step. First, the method. The cyanide, sourced from the palace's poison cabinet, the key vanished under your orchestration. Your medical background, handling such toxins in clinics past, provided expertise. The brandy bottle tampered in the pantry during a moment's distraction, when you slipped away under pretext of a headache. The glass bearing a smudge of lipstick, a clever plant, using Mademoiselle Irina's shade from a borrowed compact to sow confusion. Baxter interjected, his voice booming. But the curse note, beware the sapphire's curse. Superstition to deflect? Précisément, Poirot affirmed. Forged by you, docteur, in ink matching your journal, planted in Victor's fist post-mortem. The legend of the palace's gem, a misdirection to invoke fate over human agency. And the hidden passage, your footprints in the mud, leading to the river bank where you disposed of the vial's remnants, the boat a contingency for escape if needed. Voss's composure wavered, her angular face paling. Footprints? In snow and mud, they could be anyone's. And the shot at Mademoiselle Thorne? Surely not I. Poirot nodded to Clara, who spoke softly. I saw you, doctor, arguing with Victor in the library, your silhouette in the corridor later, before the shot. Poirot continued. The revolver, stolen from Monsieur Popescu's room during his garden wanderings. You fired to silence her witness, but haste marred your aim. Irina gasped. But why? What secret bound you to Victor? Poirot turned to Voss fully now, his voice inexorable. The deepest betrayal, mademoiselle. Dr. Voss is no distant cousin to the Countess, as claimed. She is Victor Stănescu's half-sister, illegitimate offspring of his father's affair with a Viennese seamstress. Discovered through genealogical pursuits in therapy sessions, Victor confided his family tree, unwitting of the connection. You, madame, learned of your heritage, the scorned bastard child denied inheritance, while Victor squandered fortunes. The sapphire brooch? Not merely a gem, but your mother's sole legacy, pawned to the Countess and later to Victor, who refused restitution. Blackmail ensued. You demanded the brooch and a share of his wealth, threatening exposure of his frauds. When he refused, mocking your claims, you struck. Evidence mounted as Poirot produced items. A locket from Voss's suite, containing a faded photograph matching Victor's father. Therapy notes with veiled references to blood ties. Glove fibers from the library matching her perfume-scented pair, laced with almond residue. The forged will? A red herring you planted in Duval's office via the passage to divert suspicion. Voss rose, her eyes blazing. Lies. Conjecture. No, madame, Poirot countered. The laboratory confirms your handwriting on the curse note, disguised but betrayed by the Viennese flourish. Your boots, seized this morning, match the prints precisely, and Mademoiselle Thorne's testimony seals it. You argued over the brooch that night, he denying your kinship, you vowing justice. Crumbled, Voss sank back, tears streaking her face. He ruined us. My mother died penniless while he reveled in luxury. I sought only what was mine, the sapphire's gleam, a symbol of lost birthright. When he laughed, threatened to institutionalize me as mad. The poison was mercy compared to his cruelty. Sobs racked her as Petrescu advanced, cuffs clicking shut. The room exhaled collectively. Irina, free of shadows, embraced her aunt, the wedding postponed indefinitely, but hope flickering anew. Lucien offered a tentative smile, perhaps a future canvas awaiting. Baxter clapped Poirot's back. "Damned fine work, detective." Duval sighed in relief, the palace's reputation salvageable. As the police led Voss away, Poirot bowed modestly. Order and method prevail, always. The human heart, it twists, but truth straightens the path. Boarding the train home the next dawn, Bucharest receding in the mist, he twirled his mustache, satisfied. Another puzzle solved, the gray cells triumphant.